turn on the recording. And so now we're down into these cost concepts. And so you'll note that when it comes to the cost stuff, the things that I released, I went back over because I think that these questions are going to be more challenging for a lot of students. And also it's kind of necessary for people to get through this in order to deal with the next set of material. So you'll notice we're back to the place where I decided, okay, I'm just gonna open up all of the practice questions. The other thing I'll let you know is that I also released, if you look on Blackboard, another hand-drawn assignment, which is due after we get back from spring break. So that's just to kind of put on your radar. But so this first one just goes through basically what it's trying to do is walk you through the concepts of total cost, fixed cost, and variable cost, and then also marginal cost. So those are our key concepts, and because they're all open, I'm not going to spend a lot of time walking you through it, because I think you guys are in good shape to figure it out. And then after that, we have these cost curve questions. So for the cost curve questions, the one thing that's a little bit challenging, and I'll just kind of write it here in the answer box, is that the variable cost is, there's a relationship to marginal cost that, unless you watch the videos in detail, they're going to tell you is the sum of the marginal costs. Okay, so when it says, what's the variable cost of producing 3 widgets, right? The marginal cost, and here it's constant, so it's pretty easy, right? But the variable cost is just going to correspond to the sum of the cost of each of the individual units, which is what the marginal cost is. I think where a lot of people kind of get confused is the language of marginal is unfamiliar. I often tell students to substitute the word additional and think of, like, what's the additional cost of producing another unit? And then the other thing that folks sometimes have a little bit of difficulty with later on is they think that if that all of the units should be able to be produced at the same additional cost. So like if producing the second unit costs me $5, then why does it cost more to produce the 6th unit, right? If it costs, let's say $10 to produce the 6th unit. And I'll ask you, Mitchell, since we're chatting, does that make sense to you that marginal cost, here it's constant, but it could be variable, and in general, and not variable cost, but it could vary, right? It could change as you move from unit to unit.
Yeah.
Right.
I can think of instances where that occurs. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that's the general pattern. We start here with a constant marginal cost, but usually the case is marginal cost is increasing, because as you produce more and more units, your resources get constrained, right? So one of the ways of thinking about it, and math is an important skill in economics, but I think sort of equal importance is imagination, right? Because these models are designed to represent real world phenomena, right? So really there's a business out there somewhere that's producing, and they have costs. And so you have to kind of like think to yourself, okay, like if I had a factory or I was running a Taco Bell, like why might it cost more to produce the 1,000th taco than the first one.
So like sorry to interrupt, would an example of like one of those additional costs be like if a small business grows to the point they need a safety committee, like there's just, you have to do
Well,
more stuff.
well, yeah, and then how about overtime,
That too. That's also,
right? How about running 3 shifts 24/7? You know, normally people work 8 hours, and if you, like, my dad used to work at this glass factory. He's an electrician, and there was this big, you know, glass factory that made glass bottles for everything from Budweiser beer to Coca-Cola back in the day. Owens, Illinois glass factory in Watts, California. And yeah, that's one of those types of jobs where you're on, you know, day shift. You get there at 6 in the morning, right, and work until, you know, like 2 in the afternoon. And then they have swing shift, which is 2 to 10. And then they have the people that work from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, and they work graveyard. And normally nobody wants to work graveyard. So sometimes you might get assigned there if you're like the newbie in the door type thing. But usually they have a shift differential. They pay people more money to work at night. And then if the factory slows down, guess what's the first shift that gets cut? It's graveyard.
night shift. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're going to operate 24/7 to crank out as much product as possible, those products that are at the limit of your capacity are going to cost more to produce. It's going to wear your equipment down faster. It's going to require higher labor costs. And, you know, you might even have to, you know, if you're not producing very much, you might be able to get, you know, a deal on the materials. But if you're running full tilt, you know, you're trying to get, you know, materials from whatever supplier you can to keep that factory cranking, and you may be paying more than you'd be paying if you were just, you know, well within your capacity to produce. So that's the general phenomenon. And if you think about it in, you know, any context, you might, you know, ask yourself, you know, well, you know, why, you know, isn't Target open at, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning for customers? Well, you know, to serve those customers at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's gonna be a lot more expensive than serving when everybody's out, and, you know, the middle of the day, they normally like close it by 10 p.m. Right? So yeah. And why might Target be open at 3 o'clock in the morning? Well, again, if Target's trying to produce, you know, their service is retail service, but if they're trying to produce retail service at their absolute capacity, then they might be open at 3 o'clock in the morning. But those units of retail service are going to be more expensive for them than the ones, you know, earlier in the day. So yeah, the general phenomenon is because of capacity constraints, as you push your level of output, generally they go up. So in this case, the point I wanted to make is that if I just simply add up, and I suppose I'll get a calculator to show you guys. So I'll do this and this and that, and then I'll go to a random quiz. Just pick the first one and get a calculator for us. But here, right, this unit costs 101, the second one costs 101, and the third one costs 101. So the variable cost of producing all three of those, if each one costs $101, should be 303, right? So, and sure enough, you guys can see even without the calculator, it's that. Now, the more general lesson is that the variable cost is the area below the marginal cost curve. So we could have a little rectangle here, and its area would be 3 times 101, and the area of that rectangle would be 303. So the marginal cost and the variable cost are related in that the variable cost is the sum of the marginal cost. That's the point I was making. And for you, Mitchell, it may be more meaningful for you, but the variable cost then is the integral of the marginal cost function, right? So here we have the same thing too, and it's 10 widgets. And you notice here we have a variable one. So you can play with it, but again, you're gonna end up, adding up the costs, the variable costs of all those units. We still haven't touched the fixed costs, but that's okay because oh well, that's not a fixed cost. That's part of where the marginal cost is. But well, we don't have a fixed cost in either one of these. But just notice that the variable cost is the sum of only the marginal costs, and marginal costs don't include any fixed costs. So after that, so okay. And then we have, you guys can read about this, but we have this phenomenon of diminishing marginal product, which is kind of what we talked about. When factories get constrained, then what it means is that the additional output, which is their marginal product, okay, for a given amount of inputs begins to diminish. It means it gets less, right? So they're less productive when so this doesn't have to do so much with costs, but it shows up in the costs that as the factories become less productive, their costs begin to rise. So the two ideas are linked. And so we talk about this in the videos that I've sent to you all. So I'll kind of just tell you that bit. Okay. And then here we have a variable cost and a marginal cost. So they're related, right? And how much does it cost to produce the 12th unit? So,
okay, just reading this problem, I guess I'm a little fuzzy. I think I still need to review the videos again. But would the total cost just be the variable cost plus the marginal cost, or no? Because the variable cost includes the marginal.
Right. So total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost.
Okay.
The marginal cost is a different concept, but here, right, it's asking how much does it cost to produce just the 12th unit on its own? And that actually is the concept of marginal cost. So I should be able to just go down here and it says 100, right?
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay.
Right. So I'll say 100, submit.
And it's 100.
So yeah, 2 times 7 is 14 plus 86 is 100. Boom.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is just like a test of like, do you understand the concept of marginal cost or not? Right. Now this one says, oh, assuming now we have a fixed cost, what's the total cost of producing 15 units? So this is helpful, right? Because we can just go to 15 and we can go, oh, the variable cost, oh, that's 13 units, sorry. The variable cost is $1,440, right? And that's the variable cost for, this equation I just showed you. So, and we have the fixed cost there. So we just add it to the variable costs and we're good to go. Okay. Do you guys want me to show you that it actually works out? Oh, wow, what? Okay. Well, you can see the 1,000 at the beginning, right? Let's see. Ta-da. Okay. So what's the fixed cost of production? Well, I'll let you guys figure that one out. It's not too rough. And it says here, number 7 is assuming trends continue, how much will total cost increase if the output increases from 20 to 21? Okay, well, so here you're asked to like recognize like a trend, and so stops at 20, right? And we have the total cost curve here. So it looks to me like we probably have something like a linear component to our total cost curve. I guess I'm just guessing here. So it increases by that amount, and then by that amount, and then by that amount. So it's asking us to project if it was to go one more unit, where would it go? I think you all can figure that out if you examine it carefully. But I will give you a hint, and that is if we look at the marginal costs, right? The marginal costs are going to tell us the cost of each specific unit, right? And I said, and it's true, if you think about what I'm saying, because total costs, right, only change when variable costs change, as much as it's correct to say that the variable costs are the sum of the marginal costs, it's also correct to say, if you think about it, that marginal costs are equal to the change in the variable costs. And since only variable costs change, they're also equal to the change in the total cost, right? So down here, if I look carefully at how much the total cost is changing, you'll notice that that ends up being the amount of the marginal cost, right? So down here, I can see a pretty good trend. I go from 127 to 132, and from 132 to 137. So it increased by 5 there. And from 137 to 142, that's an increase of 5 also, right? And from 142 to 147, that's an increase of 5. So you guys should be able to see the pattern for the change in total cost from the marginal cost function. Okay. Total cost of producing 8 units of output. I think that's pretty straightforward. Now we get into a little bit more of like the average cost. So you just have to remember that you're taking the average over your level of output. So if I have, normally you would say average total cost, but average cost is the same thing. If they don't say total or variable, then you know they just mean total. And that's going to be your total cost divided by your level of output. Okay. So yeah, so you can calculate that.
Sorry, what did you say? Total cost divided by what?
Q. See what I have on the screen? Do you see here?
Oh, the quantity, yeah.
Yeah, that's your level of output, right? Yeah. So, and I will tell you really quickly, like if you watch the videos, and let me do a new share. I'll go back to the whiteboard since you asked Esperanza and you're here. You know, all of this is in the videos, and it goes through it, you know, in detail, much more detail. So it's slower, but the quick, you know, set of equations is TC is equal to FC plus VC. And then ATC is equal to AFC plus AVC. And that's because if you think about it, all I did is I took this whole equation here and I divided both sides by, let me see if I can move this around a little bit. So I divided both sides by Q, right? Do you see what I mean, Esperanza?
Yeah.
So ATC divided by Q, FC divided by Q, VC divided by Q, that gives me that relationship. And it's just, you know, I mean, I'm not sure if it's clear the way that I wrote it, but hopefully you see what I mean.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And then the other one is that, so we sometimes use D to mean change in, right? So the change in VC is equal to MC, and then MC is equal to the sum of, sorry, the VC is equal to the sum of the MC. So those are the four like main equations that everything comes from. You have to be a little bit, you know, thinking about like, okay, what does Q mean and all the rest of it, but that's the gist of it. The one other thing that's talked about is there's a difference between short run and long run. So all of these things work for, like if I say the long run average total cost is the long run average fixed cost plus the long run average variable cost, right? I just put long run in front. So normally we deal with the short run curves. The one thing I want to tell you, and it was probably, so I'll talk to you, Esperanza. Have you ever, you know, thought about, I don't know, what's your major?
History.
History. So you're one of the people that's good at memorizing all this stuff.
Yeah, in the beginning, I was like, oh, he's talking about me.
Yeah, all this stuff that us economists are like, just show me an equation, you know, or like Mitchell's, you know, he's a STEM person over there in physics. He's like, just show me some math. Yeah, I mean, honestly, oh my gosh, you know, I really like history. I like personalities in history, you know, like Alexander, or you know, some of the founders of the United States, and, you know, Lincoln and the Reconstruction era and like all that stuff. Fascinating. But oftentimes I, you know, bungle the order of things, and that's not very helpful. Anyway, but if I say to you, you know, well, maybe there's some sort of analog in history that is helpful for you to think about, but you know, like if we're talking about a business operating in the short run versus the long run, do you have any idea like what that means? Like, do you have an example? Like, this is a short run, that's long run. I don't know about.
I can't really think of an example. The short run.
Well, I'll ask you another question. This is a trick question, but I'll still ask it. A lot of times it's easy for me to ask it of business majors, because in business, they're really concrete about these things more so than we are in economics. So the question is, how long is the short run?
I don't know. Is it like seasonal things?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, that's a good answer. Like, yeah, like is like a seasonal would be kind of like quarterly, like once every 3 months, right? So we're talking about business operations for the next 3 months, that's a short run, you know, cost issue, right? And if we're how long is the long run then? Well, it'd be anything longer than the short run. So if we're talking about costs, you know, beyond the first, you know, the next 3 months, then that's a long run. And that's the way that most people think about it, but that's not at all what we mean in economics, which is kind of a trip for people. They have to, you know, go like, oh, they don't mean a specific length of time. The definition of the short run in economics is the short run is the length of time, and I'll put however long. So it could be 2 days, it could be 10 years, right? But it would still be the short run, where the production can not be altered with respect to at least one input. So, I don't know if you get the meaning of that, but what it's telling us is that it's however long where the owner manager of the business is stuck with at least one input. And normally, again, it depends, but can you think of like an input that you've got a business, you're operating it? I don't know. Do you want to pick a business just to be more concrete?
Like a catering business?
Okay, so you're running a catering business, right? And what are your inputs then? Are you gonna have a building, or are you gonna have just like food trucks, or what are you gonna have?
Yeah, a food truck.
Okay, so you have a food truck, right? And so that's kind of like your location, right? It's just as mobile. But some of those food trucks like cost like $1 million to like outfit with all their cooking equipment and everything like that. It's crazy. I mean, I was watching this like special on the Discovery Channel or something. I was like, $1 million. Wow. But the point is that if you don't go out and sell food someday, right, your output zero, do you still have to pay the cost of the food truck?
Yes.
Yeah, you're stuck having to pay that cost even if you produce zero, right? So it's an example of a fixed cost. You got to pay. I don't know. I imagine people borrow money to get their food trucks, and they pay it like you would pay a mortgage, but you got to pay that mortgage payment, as long as you're in business, even if you're not operating at a particular point in time. And so you're stuck with that food truck, and likely, even if you decided you wanted to do what we call exit the industry, meaning you want to sell all your assets and get out of it, right? You probably couldn't do that and sell the food truck tomorrow, right? If the food truck is really worth, a lot of money, even a couple $100,000, right? Then you probably got to get a contract and a lawyer, and there's probably like escrow involved and inspections and other things where people are going to buy it and they want to know the equipment's good and all that stuff, right? So in the meantime, if it takes you, 90 days to get rid of the truck, then you're stuck in the short run for the next 90 days. You got to pay that truck payment no matter what. And that's what we mean by short run. The in the long run is easier to define, but maybe harder to think about it. The long run is a longer period of time than the short run, but is a situation where all inputs are flexible. So, if it takes me 90 days to sell or buy a new food truck, right? Because I could expand, right? If I'm talking about something longer than 90 days, then I have flexibility. I could add a couple extra food trucks. I could get rid of one, but all my inputs I can shape however I want. So the long run is that kind of a situation. And the reason why I say it could be 2 days, or the short run could be 2 days or 10 years is you probably don't think about it as a regular business, but if you've been by San Onofre, you ever go down there, see those nuclear power plants off the coast?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Have you been to San Diego?
Yes.
Are you on your phone the whole time, or do you look out when you're driving?
Oh no, I guess I look out. I can't think of where that is
Okay. Well, if you remember, if you're driving from here down to San Diego, then you get, I don't know, just like, I think a little bit past where the 5 and the 405 merge. And then on your right-hand side, you'll see these two big domes of concrete. And anyway, if you Googled it, and if you'd seen it, you'd know it. Maybe you passed by and you didn't really want to, like, what the heck is that? But those are nuclear power stations. And it turns out they haven't been operating for a little while because they've had a leak. I don't think they're operating at all right now. But I think Southern California Edison is the one that owns them, but they can't get rid of them. They still have to maintain them. And you can probably imagine it's because it's a nuclear facility, right? So to either build or decommission, which means to tear down and get rid of a nuclear power plant, the regulatory process takes about a decade. So if you were in the nuclear power business, then your short run would be 10 years long because you're going to be stuck with one of your inputs, right? You can't do anything with it. So short run and long run is really about flexibility in inputs. And in the short run, you have some fixed cost tied to a fixed input that is always going to be there in the short run. And in the long run, it goes away. But what I wanted to show you is that because fixed costs are associated with fixed inputs, if we're talking about the long run, you see how I just drew a line through the average fixed costs?
Yes.
In the long run, there are no fixed costs. So there are no fixed inputs, so there are no fixed costs. So we end up with this relationship. So there are a couple of other things that you guys might want to know about, and I think are talked about in the homework and obviously talked about in the videos in more detail, but I'll just put them up here really quickly as kind of some signposts for you guys, things for you guys to remember. Okay. And so, and those are, one of them we talked about already, which is exit, which is getting out of an industry, and the other one is entry. Okay, and these are types of long run decisions. The other thing is shutdown, which is a short run decision to temporarily produce nothing. So that's Q is equal to 0. And a lot of people have kind of a hard time of thinking of, well, when is a case where a business shuts down, they're producing 0 temporarily, and why are they doing it? But I think we've already talked about it in a really intuitive way, and that is, it's the same reason that Target isn't open at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? If you think about it, the normal business hours, like when the business is literally shut down, right? That is a decision that the cost of operating would be higher than the revenue they could bring in. So Target's not open at 3 o'clock in the morning because it's not profitable, right? Other businesses, so Esperanza, I don't know, can you think of any other businesses that temporarily shut down, but they're not exiting?
Certain types of manufacturing.
Yeah, can you think of one specifically, any you know of?
I can chime in if you'd like.
Yeah, Mitchell. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Pumping oil. It gets
Pumping. Yeah, so
they don't
sometimes,
necessarily stop, but they'll stop offshores. They'll shut down the more
yeah,
expensive plants if there's not the demand for it.
right, exactly. So oil is a good example, but I got one that's better. I mean, my favorite one is ski resorts. I like to ski. Just a couple weeks ago, I went up to Mammoth, and spring skiing is always iffy, for lots of different reasons. But one of the main ones is it may be too warm and there's not enough snow, right? And if the snow gets really bad, it's really patchy, then it's kind of like Target at 3 o'clock in the morning. Either they've got to, put their fake snow machines on at night and try to keep the runs, so that, a few people might want to ski on them. But at some point in time, the weather really turns against you, and it just is too expensive. And then also at the same time, people don't want to pay for that experience. So yeah, I mean, for me to tell you that ski resorts shut down in the summer months is probably a no-brainer, right? You would realize that obviously, it would be hugely expensive for them to try to provide that service when the weather's warm, right? So they just don't. And they're not exiting the industry. They're not permanently like tearing out all of the lift chairs and stuff like that. They're just saying, no, we're just going to turn stuff off and maybe keep a skeleton crew of a few people to guard the equipment or something. And, we're not going to burn the electricity to run the chairlifts. We're just, not going to produce, because it would be too expensive in that period of time to try to provide that service. If you think about like units of output being, numbers of customers served, they're serving 0 customers in the summer, right? They have 0 units of output, but it's just a temporary thing. And that's the decision to shut down, and it's driven by profit. But your book and the lectures on this topic will tell you there's a specific way to look at the costs of the firm to calculate when the best thing they can do, the most profitable thing they can do, is to shut down. By the way, I suppose the one other key concept I should point out to you all, even though we're talking about costs right now, is that, and I said this before, is that businesses are operating to maximize profit. It's just a simple way of saying we assume that all businesses are trying to make as much money as they can, right? Which normally doesn't throw most people off. Sometimes students get a little bit confused because if you think about it, I think a good example is if you think about some of the, I don't know if you guys have heard of these outdoor clothing brands like Patagonia, or pick North Face or something like that. Sometimes you hear that like Patagonia they'll do like a little campaign where they're saying, well, we're donating 10% of all of our profits to the World Wildlife Fund or to the Nature Reserve or something like that. Now, does that sound like that they're trying to maximize profits when they do that? Or do you think that they're
immediately? Does Beverly want to chime in? She unmuted.
Okay, Beverly, did you have an idea?
No, they're donating stuff, so
It sounds like they're not interested in profit when they do that, right?
yeah.
But it turns out, and what were you going to say, Mitchell?
It's tax write-offs. When you give to charities, you can make your taxes lower. So,
well, yeah, and then also think about this, right? If I'm an outdoor enthusiast and I'm buying Patagonia, and I see that they're supporting the World Wildlife Fund, and am I more likely to buy Patagonia?
Yeah.
If you like the World Wildlife Fund, sure.
Well, yeah, because I'm a nature
Yeah.
person, right?
Okay, yeah.
So
Technique.
what's that?
It's like a marketing tool when they do that.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so like a lot of people think like, oh, well, maybe these businesses aren't really interested in profit, but I can tell you in the boardrooms and in the back rooms, they are analyzing all of their different ways of creating additional demand for their product so that they can earn more money and maximize their profits. And if it turned out they were donating to World Wildlife Fund and nobody cared, and they were just gonna go and buy another brand instead or something, then they wouldn't do it for very long.
Yeah.
So
Like-
it sounds a little bit cynical on my part, but I'm just letting you guys into the reality that even if you see some brand do something that sounds like like they're doing it for the good of humanity or something like that, the truth is
The socks, the
what's that?
the socks, the Bomba socks. Like they
Okay,
donate a pair of socks if you
yeah,
buy a pair of
yeah, and
socks.
they used to do that with the Tom's shoes too. Like they'll donate a pair of shoes. And again, I mean, those are basically marketing ploys for most of the companies. And it turns out as a matter of not just business sense and economics, but also as a matter of law. Those companies are required to try to make profits for their investors.
Yeah. I mean, how can you check if they're really sending it,
Well, even if they do send it, the deal is that if you think about who their customers are that are paying, it means that there's somebody that's back home that's making a decision, meaning here in the US, saying, I'm going to buy these socks because even though they're overpriced socks, I feel good about it because I feel like I'm helping somebody else in some other part of the world, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I haven't bought any, but it's just, I don't know. You're never sure.
Yeah, well, me neither. So don't feel bad. If I want to make a charitable donation,
Exactly.
I'll just give my own money to some cause that I want.
That's the way to go.
And
that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and until then, I'm just looking for inexpensive, high quality products, and that stuff doesn't influence me. But there are a lot of people that it does influence, and if it didn't actually influence customers, then businesses wouldn't do it for very long. So anyway, so these are the main concepts, and that's really all I have to tell you guys today. And I'll be here on Thursday for office hours if you all have more questions. But if I don't see you, have a wonderful spring break, and take a couple days anyway to just relax. So that's it for me.